Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Hope you guys been enjoying the content channel as of late. Hopefully you guys been enjoying the more frequent forms of content lately. Just putting out some videos here and there. So hopefully we'll be able to keep the streak going through the next couple of weeks. We'll see. But this will be an interesting video today because I've been just looking at a lot of just numbers and just talking within the news roundup specifically about box office and talking about investments, and I kind of want to highlight this year specifically all the kind of major investments that have been going on so far. Um, it's very interesting, just given what we have, and I wanted to just kind of detail that. Um, and just kind of give you guys my thoughts on just each investment and where things kind of fall into fall into the vein of like success or failure, and just showing you just how just ridiculous it's gotten in terms of how much money has been poured into such projects. Um, so we're going to get into this. So before we get into it, as I typically do when I do my box office recaps, just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an understanding as to how I measure things. Um, Now, if it's a single digit budget, typically I will do a 2 times ratio. The 2 times ratio also is usually designated for bare minimum. So whatever film, just generally, however it costs, double, triple, single, 2 times is like bare minimum what the movie needs to do. Just bare minimum, and that's would be enough to be considered at least profitable. Um, but these are what I consider to be successful in terms of just what is what it is as a production. So if it's single digit, I think that the highest mark that you can do for single digit is a 2 times ratio. For a double digit, I would say it's 2.5, and for a triple digit, I would say it's 3 times its budget. I'm also factoring in any publicly known marketing expenses. So if there's anything we know about marketing or anything else related to it, if the information is available, I will use it as well. If it's not, then I will exclude it. But we are mainly going to be talking about productions that carry triple digit budgets. So that's how we're going to view this. And we're going to see how expensive it has gotten over the past few months with each passing project coming into theaters. And you'll see just how just crazy, just things have gotten. So let's get into this because there's a couple films we're going to be discussing here. So first of which that we're going to be talking about is Better Man. So Better Man came out in January, and like I said, we're going to be starting off from the smallest to the biggest. So we're not going to go by release; we're just going by the smallest to the biggest. So we're starting off with Better Man, and in the case of Better Man cost, at least per production, $110 million. Had a little smart marketing cost of $25 million. So overall investment puts this at $135 million. And a break-even point, if we were to times it by 3, it'd be $405 million. Bare minimum, if you were to times it by 2, would be $270 million. And per what the film grossed, 22.5 million. Yeah, obviously this is a failure, major failure. As far as I have read for this movie, this was more or less self-funded, so Paramount doesn't have a huge stake in this, so they don't take the brunt of this loss. But they did assist in marketing, as far as I can tell. So there is still a little bit of a loss going on for this film, but just generally, just for that production company and for Paramount, it's just a huge, huge failure. Um, but that's starting off on the small scale, and as we go up, you'll see how things kind of play out in different margins. But to continue forward, we have next Ballerina. This was distributed, of course, by Lionsgate, and this had a production cost of $90 million, but the marketing expenses were at least half of the production, so $45 million, and had an investment overall of $135, so matching out to Better Man. Still needing to hit the same margins that Better Man had. In this case, though, it made $132 million. So again, another failure here. And reasoning for that we've talked about is because of just the lack of appeal, lack of awareness, probably the lack of awareness of this being a John Wick film, because the about Keanu Reeves to really market as much. So there's all those aspects to contend with, and clearly people just did not really care. They just did not really care to see someone else take up that style. Keanu Reeves appears to be the only selling point, the real solid selling point to these movies. So, but yeah, that is matching out to Better Man. So now I believe it's going to go up a little bit because now we're going to talk about Sinners. So Sinners, as far as I can tell, had a production cost as high as 100 million. I heard from reading a lot of areas it was the people were saying 90 million, but for as far as Heights is concerned, how big production could have been, people were saying that it was as high as 100 million. So I'm going to count it as that. Also, considering that the marketing costs were around 50 to 60 million based on a simple Google search that I did, regardless if it was 90 million on production, it still amounts to 100 something million. So it qualifies for this list. Um, so investment total here is around 150 to 160 million if we were to believe the production was 100 million. Its break-even point would be around 450 to 480 million dollars, and bare minimum the movie would have to do 300 to 320 million dollars. So total gross, it made at least 365.9 million. So even though it didn't reach the heights of because just to explain, the bare minimum number as I illustrated, that is just what the film needs to do. The break even point is what I believe the company would want this film to do, and that's the expectations for the company. So in the case of Sinners, it was a profitable film. It did turn a profit, but it did not reach this heights of what the company were wanting for this movie to do, for what this film should be doing. You know, so it is a success story, but it is not a major success story. It could have been if it reached heights of like 450. So so just to understand that, because I guess it might get a little confusing when you see break even and bare minimum. That's what I'm trying to illustrate with those 2 points. Bare minimum is just that's literally how much it has to do. Break even is this is what the company would like it to do. So in order in their eyes to really be completely satisfied with it. But this was also during a period, where Warner Brothers was in a bit of a shakeup period. So I think that they're just happy regardless with this. Um, and I mean, they should be because I mean, it ended up doing above average, so it did and ended up doing good, not great, but ended up doing good. So there's still some good stuff to talk about, with regards to Sinners, but it's to say that the heights could have what the margins for this, the higher margins were not met, but it passed the bare minimum easily. It passed the bare minimum, so it is a success. It's a solid place to be, in terms of Sinners. So yeah. And then of course, if we're talking Warner Brothers, oh no, that's the next. Sorry, that's not it. Sorry, I was thinking the next thing was going to be Minecraft, but that's later on. But switching up from Warner Brothers to Disney now, Lilo and Stitch. So this had a production cost of 100 million, marketing cost also of 100 million. So now we're now at an investment total of 200 million dollars. Break even point for this would be 600 million if you times it by 3, timesing it by 2, you would have to do 400 million. Obviously became hugely profitable for Disney, raking in $1.019 billion, currently the highest grossing film here domestically. So, yeah, huge success for Disney. Absolutely, that is just a lot of money that they made off that. So, and there's a reason why a sequel is also in development right now. So yeah, big success there for Disney. Absolutely a big success story for Disney. But as you can see, we're now in the 200 range, and we'll see how far that number goes once we move forward to the next one. The next one we're going to talk about is Mickey 17. So this had a production cost of 118 million, Marketing costs there were 80 million. Now we do also know about reshoots, which were an additional 10 million. This is on top of that 118. So overall investment here is $208 million. Its break-even point was around 624 million. Bare minimum, the movie would have to have done at least 416 million. Um, Total gross 131.8 million. So yeah, uh, big failure for Warner Brothers there. I heard it lost them at least like 80 to 90 million, which I guess I don't know if that suits tracks fully. I think that's kind of just giving specifics. I think they're just talking purely on production. I think that's what they're maybe illustrating on. Um, but yeah, it did not do well for them, and largely due to the fact that this is similar to Better Man. It's a very niche market. In the case of Better Man, it was specifically catering to the foreign market, the UK specifically, because here in the US, people are not familiar with that specific musician or artist. In the case of Mickey 17, this is purely to do with content, and it's not a familiar IP. It's not a writing with a large, massive, visual aesthetic. I mean, it has some visual elements here and there, but it's a very specific kind of film, and clearly it just wasn't for everybody. If it was a lot lower, then I think that it might have been a lot more attainable. But yeah, this is also a victim of delays and again reshoots. So so the cost kept amounting up, and that's how you arrive at that $208 million mark. So, but yeah, that's Mickey 17 for you. And the next film that we're going to talk about is a Minecraft movie. Of course, for Warner Brothers, this is the film that they're the most happy with because based on the information here, production costs were at least 150 million. Marketing costs, they never really disclosed that information, but I'm assuming it was at least 100 million because there was a ton of marketing for this movie. So I assume at least bare minimum 100 million. Is now sitting at 250. Their break-even point was 750. Bare minimum, the film would have to have done at least $500 million. So total gross $955.1 million. You're in a pretty good spot. So yeah, for the while, this was the highest grossing film domestically, and then Lilo&Stitch came along and took that crown. But still, big success for them. Definitely a critical point for the company because, again, there was a lot of shakeup going on. They just announced a couple layoffs, unfortunately. At least 10% of the film division, I guess, is getting laid off. So that's very unfortunate. They say that's in relation to the merger or the splitting between splitting the company into two, but who knows? But yeah, very profitable for Warner Brothers. Definitely, the film they're probably going to be the most happy with when the year is all said and done. So, but yeah, now we're at 250. So let's see how high this goes. So next one we're going to talk about is How to Train Your Dragon. So same investments, same numbers that it needs to hit, and this had a total gross of 605.9 million. So this did okay. This did fine. This wasn't again like similar to how I talked about Sinners. Their break even point was 750, so it didn't hit the higher margins that the company probably was expecting a film like this to do. Um, but it was able to go above its bare minimum. So as per what the investment is and per what the kind of margins this film needed to hit, it ultimately did fine. It did good. Again, to Sinners, it did good, and you can understand why a sequel is in development because it did enough to satisfy. Um, so I initially was um, I initially didn't think it was doing too well, but then upon revisiting and looking at it um, more objectively, with bare minimum in consideration and a break and the higher margins to think about. Yeah, I mean it did okay, but it didn't do as big as it should have been. So yeah, So it did enough to satisfy. And that's why you have a sequel in development. They shouldn't have announced a sequel so early, though. I still don't think that that was smart. I don't like when studios do that when they announce things before their movies come out. I really don't like that at all. But at least in this case, it proved to be not a terrible decision. So, all right. Next film we're going to talk about is Elio. Whew. Uh, yeah, Elio. Its production cost is all the same. All, marketing same. So same investment, same margins it needs to hit. Yeah. Total gross 138.5 million. Yeah. Um, yeah, this is probably I would argue probably Disney's biggest failure this year. I mean, Snow White, I would understand is probably Disney's biggest failure, and we'll get to that pretty soon. Um, but yeah, just by gross alone, I think Snow White performed a little bit better than Elio did. Um, and yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. I mean, Pixar has just not been in a great place. It also illustrates again just people's disinterest with original content. They're just more content with familiarity and nothing else. So yeah, so it's very unfortunate. And I mean, I actually liked the film as well, so it's even more unfortunate because I think it's actually a decent film. Um, but but yeah, yeah, definitely a big loss for Pixar. Definitely a big loss for Disney. So, and I believe the Disney train is in full swing now because now we're going to go to Captain America: Brave New World. Now, this actually jumped up a little bit. Production now went to 180. Marketing costs still sitting at 100 million. Now we're at an investment of 280 million dollars. Break even point here would be 840 million if you times it by three. Bare minimum, the film would have to do 560 million dollars. Total gross 415.1 million. So yeah, did not end up turning a profit. Was a loss for them. Um, I think a lot of that is attributed to just with a lack of both fatigue and also um, replacing the guard. With a different actor. It's different things going on that is not as appealing to audiences. Especially with this new age of superheroes, specifically Marvel, it's just not been as attractive than it was in the past. So yeah, did not do well. Did not do too well there. And then I believe the next film, which carries the exact same budget, oddly enough, Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts also carrying the same exact investments, same production and marketing expenses, same margins it needs to hit. They were lower. Their total gross was $382.3 million. So they lost more money compared to Captain America, and I think that's purely to do by just name. I think that's purely to do with just literally what it is. Most people are not going to know a lot of who these people are, first of all, and also no one knows what the hell Thunderbolts is. So I can understand why this had a lower attendance number because Captain America, you can at least ride that name value. With this, no one's going to really know what the hell Thunderbolts is. They can know the Marvel logo, and that's why it got some attraction, but not, you know, any bigger, So yeah, I feel like this should have came out in August or something later past the summer. It feels a lot more fitting there. Not a major summer release. So yeah, Marvel has not been in the best spot. Not been in the best spot. Disney has not been in the best spot. That's three failures from Disney. So yeah. So let's move on from that. We're at 280 still. I believe we're about to jump up now. No, we're still on 280. Never mind. So now we're going to move from Disney, going to Universal now with Jurassic World Rebirth. Now, There's a ton of numbers out there for this film, and we'll discuss more of those numbers in the box office recap because there's been some discrepancy with information. But we'll just talk bare minimum, with just bare minimum of what we know with information, and then we'll talk box office in the box office video more about all the discrepancies that were going on. But bare minimum, the movie cost 280 as a total investment. So same margins it would need to hit. Right now, it is at $721.5 million. So well on its way to do good. I would not be surprised if it ends up hitting that 840 mark. So this is a win for Universal, at least by profit. I think that the studio is probably a little disappointed by this movie though, because I think that when you look at the other films, which all are $1 billion a piece, I think that for this to go below that, I feel is going to be seen as a disappointment for the company. But if we're just talking about just purely, just profit, I think the film is on its way to to hit those higher marks. So generally, the movie has done well. But I think that how well it will do, I don't think. I mean, at this point, clearly, it's not going to be hitting $1 billion. Um, which again I think is going to be seen as a bit of a disappointment for the company, given just what was delivered in the last trilogy. Um, but just purely for what is purely just with the money that's been made, it's it should be deemed successful. It should or at least be considered a success because it's doing more than bare minimum, and it probably will hit that break even point pretty soon here. So yeah, this is a success. I don't know if the company will view it though as that way, but it definitely is a success. So, but yeah, so now I think we're gonna jump up. So we've been on this 280 number for a little bit. So now we're gonna jump up to $300 million with the Fantastic Four. So Fantastic Four got a little bit more of little more price tag attached to it compared to Thunderbolts and Captain America. Their production costs were 200 million. Again, some discrepancies going on because Disney apparently is not releasing numbers. I don't know why. They're not being completely genuine or completely just truthful with the numbers apparently. I don't know why. Again, we'll talk about that more in the box office recap, but again, we're just going with bare minimum here. So bare minimum, the movie costs 200 million. Marketing costs, we know Marvel typically does 100 million for movies, so we're going to put that $100 million marketing cost there. That's just usually what they do. Investment is 300 million, so their break-even point is now higher. So they have to make the higher margins would have to be $900 million. Bare minimum, 600 million. And so far, it's made $227.1 million. This is still fairly fresh, so we'll see after the second weekend where things are with this. But as far as I'm concerned, anyway, um, I've read that this is looking to have a 55 to 60% drop off, which is not super great. Um, so I think that by the end of the day, I think that it might end up hitting its bare minimum mark, but I don't think for the company, I don't think that that's what they want this to do. I think that they would want this to do a little bit more, something along the lines of like 700, maybe 800 million. There's no way it's going to hit 900. I can tell you that for sure. It's not that kind of film. Um, it doesn't have that kind of audience behind it either. So I think it might end up doing bare minimum, enough to just wash its face. Maybe. I don't know, just because Marvel this year has just not been great. Um, so we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. It's kind of hard to judge. I think that I because August doesn't really have a whole lot going on. I mean, there's little things here and there, but nothing that will be like like a major competition for movies like Fantastic Four or other films that we'll talk about in a sec. Um, but I don't know. I think that this might get as close to 600 million. But I also would not be shocked if this movie doesn't really turn a profit at all because of just how Marvel has been this year. And with fatigue going on right now, I don't know. And the brand Fantastic Four does has a negative reputation to it, so we'll see. We'll see where things end up for this, but I'm leaning more towards I'm leaning more towards this being a disappointment and a potential loss for the company. But we'll see. We'll see how it all transpires in the next few weeks. So, speaking of doing bare minimum, let's talk about Superman. Superman's investment was a little bit more pricey than Fantastic Four. Their production costs were 225 million. Their marketing expenses were 125 because I read more articles and they were actually trying to. I think they weren't trying to. I don't know if they were trying to hide that information or if they were just like throwing that information out at a very like outside the weekend. You know what I mean? It's just like you had to like find that information. I found it through Variety that there was a 125 after they said 100 million. So I don't know where all this discrepancy is coming from, but uh, yeah, I just find it very weird. But anyhow, I mean, their investment is apparently, at least by my information, $350 million. So now their break-even point is even higher. So the break-even point for Superman, if the higher margins, would be $1.05 billion, and bare minimum, the film would have to do $700 million. So James Gunn, I don't know why you're saying that the film doesn't have to do $700 million. It absolutely has to. So far, the film has grossed $510.9 million, and that's coming off of its third weekend, I believe. So I don't know. I honestly don't know if this will reach it. I would like to say it could, um, but I don't know. We talked about this before with Man of Steel being the highest grossing Superman film, and that was like a $600 million gross. So Uh, I don't know. This carries, I believe, almost the exact same investment that Man of Steel had. So Man of Steel barely made money, where this I feel is probably going to be fated to have a similar number. I don't think this is going to end up doing anything higher than 700. More than likely lower than 700 at this point. So, and I don't think that's a great thing for the series. I don't think the series is off to a great start. I think it's uh, that's why you're hearing things like Wonder Woman and a Batman film being in development now because they know that they need to start making some kind of cash. And the stuff they have coming out, Supergirl, Clayface, I don't think those are going to be drawing in major numbers. So they need something else out there because clearly Superman is not the answer, or at least Superman is not the the pillar to hold on to. So yeah, not doing great, not doing the best. So we'll see in a few weeks where things end up with this, but I'm predicting either bare minimum or definitely a little bit of a small loss when it's all said and done. So, alrighty, moving on from that, let's talk about Snow White. So, of course, this was Disney's potentially Disney's biggest flop of the year. Obviously, I could. There's an argument you can make for Elio, but when you look at the investment itself, bearing now $370 million, yeah, it's kind of hard to argue against it. Break-even point for this was 1.11 billion. Bare minimum, the film would have had to do 740 million, and total gross so it made was $205.7 million. So yeah, major loss for the company. I would argue probably a major loss. Probably one of the biggest loss probably in the past few years. When you just think about just that investment alone. Um, yeah, uh, many reasons for it. Obviously, there was tons of controversy that plagued the film for many years. Lots of reshoots, delays that also played a big part into it as well. Yeah, It's not a good film either, unfortunately. I wish I could say it's a better film, but it is not. And I just feel bad for the actress, honestly. But yeah, $370 million now. And this train is not stopping yet because we are now going to move forward to the next thing, which is F1. This was distributed by Warner Brothers. They have production costs as high as 300 million, marketing cost at least 100 million. Investment overall is 400 million dollars potentially. There's some reports that say 200, some people say 300 for production, but it's as high as $400 million. Break even point for this, $1.2 billion. Bare minimum, the film would have to have done $800 million. So far, it's grossed 511.6 million dollars. Yeah, not great. Not great. Apple financed this, so Warner Brothers is not taking the brunt of this. Apple will be taking the brunt of it, and Apple will probably say some stupid shit that Amazon's saying like, "Oh no, we don't care about those numbers. We care about how it performs on streaming." Meaning, like, why don't you just put this out in streaming in the first place? But um, yeah, I mean, 500 million is not a bad number. That's not a number I would like just be like, oh, whatever. It's like, no, that's sizable. But when you look at that investment, it's like, nah, dude, you need to do a lot more, and it's clearly not going to get there. This came out, I believe in June, so it's been well over a month now. So that number is probably not going to get any higher. Maybe at at this point, maybe like 600 million. But yeah. So this is not good. This is not good. Um, yeah, a lot of this is because of just, I believe, partial delays and also practicality. They're using a lot of Formula One vehicles and that type of, just industry, those specific kinds of vehicles. And Brad Pitt also being involved. There's some hefty price tags that are going to come your way. So I can understand, partially why the film costs as much as it does. Don't mean, though, that you have to invest so heavily. I just don't think that for the type of movie this is, no. And the only reason I think that it's gotten as high as it's gotten is just because of marketing, just because of just how much they chose to market the film. Otherwise, I just don't think people would really seek this out in any larger ways. So, so yeah, not particularly strong for F1. But we're not done. We still have one more film to discuss, and you might have guessed it if you guys have been following all this news about investments and stuff like that. If you guys are familiar with numbers just with movies this year. Obviously, the biggest investment that has come out of this year so far is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. So their production costs were at least $400 million. We do not know their marketing expenses, and I understand why because of just purely reading the production number. But I'm going off with the assumption that it was at least 100 million, just because they did some marketing for it. So we have an investment potentially as high as $500 million, $500 million potentially for Mission Impossible. Break even point for this was $1.5 billion. So it had to be one of the highest grossing films of all time. And bare minimum, the movie would have to have done at least $1 billion. So total gross, $592 million. So yeah, yeah. You're not going to hear about Mission Impossible for a while. Definitely not. There's a reason why this is called The Final Reckoning. Remember, if you guys followed the news, the reason why they called this The Final Reckoning and why they billed it as the final film was purely because they were scared about how much this movie was going to do and the rising costs that were coming up with it. So this had nothing to do with story. This had nothing to do with narrative. This had nothing to do with being planned out, anything like that. As far as I read, Tom Cruise was actually against it. So at least as far as what I read in early reports. So, yeah, once you put that in context, you can understand why this movie is being billed as the final one because it probably will be the final one for a little bit. Um, yeah, major loss for Paramount. They probably won't say that, but it definitely is a major loss for them. Um, yeah, yeah, that is just that to me is insane that we're at this point, like right now, just with film, that we can get to those heights. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm pretty sure there's movies like Avengers Endgame or other things that have more and higher investments than this. Um, but it is just insane to me, seeing just with like each passing film, especially as of late, just like Superman, Fantastic Four, F1, like all these films that have come out recently, they have just massive investments attached to them. Um, it's insane. And when you look at the successes versus the failures, there's really only a few, really five films that really have turned a profit and have become successful. The rest, yeah, I mean, this should be illustrative of how, like, especially when you look at the ones that have done well, right? These are on the lower tier. There is an exceptions to some extent. There are some exceptions that come your way, like Jurassic World, for example. Jurassic World is a very, very popular series. I mean, the other films, like I said, they made $1 billion a piece. So I can understand why you want to invest into something like this a little more heavily, because you have potential to still carry over that sort of profit, but also it's that weird mentality of studios where you invest more to get more. That whole mentality I just hate. Um, and they still believe the spirit is still the same. That is 2018, 2019. It's not. We're in a very different period now when it comes to the theatrical experience. Um, but it's largely to do with familiarity, largely to do with IPs. Like when you look at the successes again, largely familiar IP names, largely familiar, just source material. Something like Sinners, again, an outlier to that, but you have to also consider the genre that film is in. It's a horror film. Typically, horror plays very well in a theater. Um, and as far as Sinners was concerned, also, it had a very stable viewing. It was very consistent throughout each week as far as the numbers were concerned. There wasn't a major drop off from that, from viewing Sinners. And I believe Sinners was also one of the few horror offerings that were out in theaters at the time. So therefore, it had a higher advantage. So, but that's a lot of what plays now, lower margins typically, because 4 out of 5 of these films, they're not carrying like 300, $400 million price tags. They're carrying like 200 to 250. And then you have something like, Jurassic World, which is a little bit more pricey. Um, but a large reason to why these movies do well is because of familiarity, because of just familiarity with product, familiarity with names, with characters, of stories. That's what gets people to go to the theater. Because when you look at the failures, you know, it largely is also to do with fatigue. It also largely has to do um, with uh, with just redundancy, and also just purely to do with prices, like purely to do with investments. A lot of these movies that you're seeing on the failure side, they are $300 million price tags. They're close to those numbers, and they they shouldn't have to be that way. They really shouldn't, you know. So the better place to be right now is on lower scale. To be on lower scale. I mean, even though these movies are carrying $200 million over here on the success sides, I would still try to make it lower. I would still try to hit lower margins, like 150 as an entire investment, or like bare minimum just 200. Sure, okay, that seems a little bit more doable, especially given what kind of IPs or what kind of what kind of product we have here. But that is so far this year. I mean, we still have other films coming out. I know that Paul Thomas Anderson's next film, One Battle After Another, which looks pretty good. I know that carries a hefty price tag, and We know films like Zootopia 2, Avatar, of course, we know is going to be expensive. Trying to think what other ones are coming out. Tron, the next Tron film. There's still some pricey gambles that are going to come our way. Some will probably end up being fine, like Avatar, for instance. But films like Tron, right? I can't tell you if that's going to do all that great. Um, but it's largely to do with just familiarity and just really, frankly, just care with properties. And I think that showing you this, I think it's just really crazy seeing how much money gets poured into film, especially in this period right now, and just really kind of a moronic rationale. I understand some of these things are stem from delays, stemming from reshoots, or victims of the pandemic potentially, which at this point really it's not a factor. Um, but it's becoming less understanding to me when you start seeing those higher marks. When you start getting to 300, 400, 500 million dollar range, it just makes very little sense for me why they have to be why these investments are so high. You know, it just makes little sense, especially when you consider the theatrical market right now. It's lower. The attendance numbers are not as high. People are not as invested to go to the theater because of the streaming services that exist now. The fact that you can get films a lot sooner than what was previously because the theatrical window was split in half. All these things we've discussed, right? Like it's it's not smart to still invest as heavily as you would back in the days of 2017, 2018, or 2019. We're not in those periods anymore. So we have to set back, we have to scale back. And I think that you would see films like Mission Impossible or any of these Marvel films. I'm guaranteeing you these films would probably do a little bit better um, if their investments were not as high. Obviously, you're also combating fatigue also within their genres and within their own individual series, but their margins would not have to be so incredibly high, to turn profits. So it'll be interesting to see, down the line, with other films like Avatar and stuff like that, how much their investments are and their type of margins they have to hit, and if they can just literally hit them. So, so we'll see. We'll see. But I just kind of wanted to outline that because I just been noticing all these numbers and they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just kind of wanted to show that progression, just with this year alone with major tentpole releases or just with just films in general, at least in like, yeah, uh, major notable films. It's just crazy seeing the amounts that are being pouring into these movies. But you guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below with all these investments that we talked about. It is just insane. It's just crazy how much is being poured into film, and it just makes very little sense in this current market. But you guys, let me know. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you guys feel it's justified to be spending this much? Do you guys agree with my assessment with kind of what the movies, with which films have done well, which films have not? And what are your predictions for later down the road with films like Avatar, like Tron, or Zootopia? How do you think those films will do? What do you think? What kind of investments they're carrying? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.